All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our alumni webinar. So glad that you all could be here today and tune in to hear from our special guests to hopefully share some encouraging words about the application process and finals week and what the middle school competition at Society for Science experience meant to them. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get things started. So my name is Reva Ramadorai. I'm the director of the Society's middle school competition, now called the Thermo Fisher Scientific Junior Innovators Challenge, formerly known as the Broadcom Masters, here with my colleague, Gabby Freckman. Gabby and I are responsible for the Thermo Fisher JIC program, and you've probably, if you're watching this, probably have received a lot of emails from us this spring about the application process. So this session is being recorded for students who cannot join us today so that they can also hear this information later. So like I mentioned, today we're going to talk with some alumni who were finalists in the competition. And before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick overview of the Thermo Fisher JIC program itself. So Thermo Fisher JIC is a program of Society for Science, which is the organization that Gabby and I work for. The Society also runs 3 other distinguished science competitions. The first is the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair, which you might have seen just happened last week. And that competition is the world's largest international pre-college science competition and is open to high school students. Next, the Regeneron Science Talent Search is the nation's oldest and most prestigious science and math competition for high school seniors. And finally, we have the Thermo Fisher JIC, which is the one that, if you're watching this, you've probably been nominated for.
So the Thermo Fisher JIC is the premier national science fair-based competition for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. To qualify to enter Thermo Fisher JIC, a student must first place within the top 10% in a society-affiliated science fair. And if you're watching this video, you likely have already received a nomination. So congratulations. This is an incredible opportunity. You should be very proud of winning a nomination, and we highly encourage you to make the most of it. If you haven't already opened an application, hopefully you will after this webinar. Ultimately, 30 finalists have the opportunity to spend a week showcasing their research projects and competing as teams in hands-on STEM activities. We have several recorded webinars to walk you through the application process and answer your questions. You can find recordings of these in the Resources tab in your SurveyMonkey Apply account.
Awesome. So now we're going to go ahead and introduce our special guests, our alumni. So today we're speaking with some 2022 finalists, Thomas and Moitri, and we also have our 2019 finalist, Warren, here. And these wonderful alumni are here to talk to you all about their experiences as finalists in the program, share their advice for you as applicants this year through the process, and to answer your questions. So first off, we have Thomas Aldis from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In 2022, he won the $25,000 Samueli Foundation Prize, which is the top prize of the competition, for his project titled Remote Rescue Robot, Robotic Hand Controlled by Human Motion. So Thomas built a robotic hand that is connected to a glove, which when worn by a human can be moved. He can basically move their fingers on this robotic hand. And he was inspired by the rescue robots used in the aftermath of the 2011 tsunami in Japan. So he wanted to design something that could be used in times of disaster. So Thomas enjoys track, debate, and playing the piano, and one day hopes to be a mechanical engineer. Hi, Thomas. Thanks for joining us.
Next, we have Moitri Santra from Oviedo, Florida, who won the 2nd place Technology Award in 2022 for her project titled Innovative Engineering Tools for Controlling Harmful Algal Bloom, Year 3. Moitri developed a system and materials to collect harmful algae from bodies of water with dead zones. In her free time, Moitri plays the piano and softball, and she also participates in competitive chess.
One day, she wants to become a chemical engineer.
And last but not least, we have Lauren Egiaga from New Orleans, Louisiana. Lauren won the Department of Defense STEM Talent Award in 2019 for her project titled Ozone Depletion, How It Affects Us. After learning about ozone depletion and how a thinner layer of ozone will lead to more harmful ultraviolet light radiating through the Earth's atmosphere, Lauren researched the effects of increased radiation on plants. Her favorite sport is volleyball, and she plays the piano, flute, and ukulele. And Lauren is interested in becoming an anesthesiologist and traveling with Doctors Without Borders one day. So hello all. Thank you again for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started by jumping into questions. And hopefully this first one is, well, it might be a little bit difficult to answer. But can you start by telling us about your favorite part of finals week and what should current applicants be excited about when they're applying? Thomas, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. I think my favorite part of finals week was just like all the activities that we did. We had like the challenges and competitions and things, but we also just did other things like around Washington, D.C. And it was really fun because like every day felt so full. It was kind of weird coming back to like real life, and it was hard to feel like productive after everything we did. And it was, I mean, it's like a good thing because it was really, really fun. And you got to meet lots of great people. So I think that's probably my favorite part of the week.
Yeah, we definitely kept some jam-packed schedules going. So yeah, appreciate that. It was well enjoyed though. Moitri, how about you?
Yeah, so I think that honestly, I mean, there's really two things that I think people should look forward to and was my favorite part. So I think the first thing, of course, from a personal level, just being able to get my project and my efforts out there to a wider audience was, of course, something to look forward to. But also being able to meet with other finalists who are just as like-minded and just as passionate about science and research as you are. And I was able to learn about how each of us are working towards and really contributing to science. And it was, just an amazing and unique experience being able to collaborate with the other finalists and just seeing how each of us is putting in their efforts towards science. It was really nice.
That's awesome. Thanks, Moitri. Lauren, what about you?
No, I would definitely say it's my answer would be like a mix of both of those. I really just loved probably the teams. I don't know if it was like on purpose, but to like I was in the green team on like a lot of like environmental centered projects, but not only that, but when we were able to like do certain challenges like out in the open, we were able to interact with like other teams and like see like how they worked, how they bonded. And so I really like getting to basically, I would say finalists should look forward to working with like-minded people, but like also being like inspired by them as well was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole thing.
That's awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I think that's generally meeting other like-minded students, other students who are interested in research is always a huge takeaway for our finalists.
Yeah, thank you all for those answers. So our next question is, why should students apply to the National Middle School Competition, and what motivated you to apply? Maybe we can go in reverse this time. Lauren, would you like to start?
Yeah, I would definitely say that they should apply just for the heck of it. That may not like make sense, but when I was in the 8th grade during this project, it was really for fun. So like I didn't foresee myself coming this far. And it's sort of like if I wouldn't have applied or wouldn't have taken that leap to apply, even though I didn't think I'd come this far, I would have never like known what I could accomplish and how I could have been impacted by such an inspiring weekend. And so I would just say apply, because you'll never know how you can be inspired by what you can learn. And I think that, no matter like how far they get, they probably have like a lot of positive just outcomes just for like putting themselves out there, completing the application, getting like a taste of like how to like communicate their research that can like, help them further down the road if they want to continue doing science in high school or in college, like there's just so many benefits just to like applying in general. And so I think just more of like the confidence impact that it has on you and like the validation that it has for your work is a big reason why they should.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, lots of great points there. I think you're right that there's more benefits to applying than you might think at first. Moitri, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm kind of adding on to what Lauren said, that there are so many benefits of applying. So, I mean, I know for myself, I applied to Broadcom Masters 3 times before getting in. And all 3 times, I just remember that, just being able to clarify my project in my head through those questions just really gave myself a better understanding and a stronger understanding of my project, because these questions are things that you wouldn't really normally think of, but they do really get your head going on, why am I doing this project? I mean, what's the impact behind it? So what's, the impact of the ideas? So I think not only does it give you a better understanding of your project, but again, you never know how far you're going to go. I mean, the outcome and, the opportunities are just great. I mean, you see that there's people going to this, the top 30 finalist place, and they're having a lot of different benefits from going there. So I think it's a mix of, for yourself, applying is just a great way to get a stronger understanding, but also just, knowing that you could have the opportunity to attend, the higher level of the competition, and just, having fun throughout the process. They're all things to consider when you're trying to get motivated to apply.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I think a lot of students might get stuck because the application seems daunting, but that's great to hear that, it obviously helped you to answer all of those questions. So thank you. Thomas, what motivated you to apply?
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of those answers. I think really just like you never know, and it's such a great experience if you get into the top 30 especially, but even just top 300 or even being able to apply at all is amazing. And so like for me, this was my first year doing a project. I didn't even know honestly that like this larger middle school competition existed when I was starting my project. So like you just never know when you're if you have the ability to apply. I think that you absolutely should, because you don't know how far you're going to go with it, and I think you have the ability to go farther than you might think. So the application can be daunting. I know looking at like last year's winners and finalists can be kind of intimidating, but really I think that it's such an amazing opportunity that you should really just give it a shot.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like that's a great perspective to share too. And yeah, it might seem intimidating when you look at some of the final projects, but knowing, your own story, Thomas, of that was the first year that you had applied and didn't know about the competition, and you were able to make the top prize. So both ends of the spectrum there, hearing Moitri's experience too, and just knowing that the benefit of reapplying was really helpful. And ultimately in that third year, she made it too. So there's a wide range of nominees that get nominated to apply to the competition. So it's always better to take the shot than to not and wonder what might have happened. So this next question kind of builds on that, for the students that might still be debating whether or not to apply, even after hearing this wonderful advice, and, may not have seen themselves as scientists or engineers before. Can you each tell us a little bit about your own STEM story? How did you become interested in STEM or research? And what words of advice might you have for some students that might be feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome? Moitri, do you want to go ahead and get started with this one?
Sure. So yeah, I think for my STEM story, I think the two main points are, you should be inquisitive and, be curious, because those two things combined really lead you to wherever you want to with science. I mean, doing both of those things has allowed me to uncover, findings that I wouldn't have uncovered otherwise. And I believe that, ideas come from curiosity and just being observant. And I think that if you do that, then you can envision yourself as, a scientist or an engineer. Because, if you ask any scientist or engineer, you'll see that, they're always looking around them, seeing, what problems are there around you, and just being curious and really inquisitive about, why is this happening, or, what are the limitations of the current solution. So there's a lot that goes into it, but I think that as long as you're, curious and you're inquisitive, I think that those two things will help you better envision yourself as a scientist or engineer.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Maitri, and I think that's so important. Just as almost any simple question can really build itself into a research project if you think about it. So it's a great kind of easy starting block to kind of go from there. Thomas, how about you?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in STEM and various things. It's funny, I watched a documentary on Disney Plus about ISEF, and that's how I learned that these fairs existed. And I was still in middle school, so I wanted to get ahead and then try doing a science fair. And so I applied my regional fair, and then obviously Broadcom, I learned that that was a thing and applied. I think, like I said before, if it's people do some pretty crazy things for their projects, and especially I know when I was applying to Broadcom, I was looking at the previous year's winners, and it feels like a long shot. I think it should feel like a long shot, but it again, you really just never know. And I would say just you've done great research. Especially, I mean, if you're here, you clearly you qualified to even apply. You did really amazing research. So I think that you should be proud of that and just try to see where you can go with it from here.
Yeah, I think great. That's great advice. What you said is totally true, and what we hope we get across to all of you nominees as well, that really it's a huge step even just being nominated in the first place. So be confident in the work that you've already done to get here, and all you have to do now is write about it and submit, and who knows where you'll go from there. Lauren, what about you? Tell us a little bit more about your STEM story, words of advice for folks that might not see themselves in this position.
Totally. So I really love Moitri's little bit about curiosity and inquisitiveness, because that totally represents me before I started doing science fair in middle school. So for me, I also had no clue about Broadcom or about competitive science competition. It was more of something that I had to do for my school. And it was I could either do this with half interest and just get my grade, or I can really dig deep into what science fair is about. And so I've always loved environmental science. I've always gardened since I was little. And so I knew that out of the hundreds of categories out there, I knew that plant science or earth and environmental science is definitely something that I want to dig deep into. So that's probably how I got started. Down here in Louisiana, there's a lot of close to environmental issues that we have as well. And so I sort of just researched one, what is something that somebody with not a lot of resources or not a lot of money to have, certain high-end tech to be able to study certain things can research, both observational and quantitatively. And so that's when I decided to reach out to university professors or college people, or even your own teachers. One thing that I can say about imposter syndrome is getting support. So I didn't know that I had support out there to help me with the project. When I actually reached out, I actually had a lot of support that I realized. And so I would say it's really just embracing your curiosity and your inquisitiveness, and combining what your interests are. Because I remember in my regional and state fairs, there were projects about everything from gaming to just a lot of things that you wouldn't think would be a science project, but they made it work. And I would say for those struggling with imposter syndrome, 5 main things is to embrace your uniqueness, because believe it or not, everybody else is applying also thinks that they don't have a shot. And so it's at least you have something in common there, but you're not the only person that's feeling out of place. I would also celebrate small victories. So once again, like when you're applying for competition, it's like whether you become top 300 or top 30, you want to celebrate all those victories because you don't want to focus on what you have been accomplished, but acknowledge and celebrate what you have accomplished. And of course, seek support, reach out to mentors, teachers, and professionals in STEM. Embrace failure as well, because failure is part of the learning process. Like, don't let that discourage you too much. And then take risks and explore was probably my 5 main takeaways from when I did Science Fair.
Thanks, Lauren. I think that is a wonderful segue to our next question, which is about making mistakes. Research can be really tough, and sometimes you make mistakes, but that's usually okay. So we just wanted to ask what mistakes you made during your research process, if any, and what did you learn from it? Thomas, start with you.
So I did an engineering project for my project last year, and so like half of what I did was make mistakes because nothing works the first try or the second try. There were lots of things that like I didn't know how to do before like I did them for the project. And so those definitely I struggled to make that work. But I think, and this is also true for other types of research as well. I think in a little bit of a different way, but you know, you're going to make mistakes. That's not what matters. What matters is that you can learn from it and be able to hopefully overcome those mistakes, and if not, you know, compensate for it and find a way to make it work in some other way. You know, in engineering, that would be trying to fix whatever technical issue you're having, and in research, you know, you can run into roadblocks and things. But if you are able to get through it, it really shows that you have the capacity to do really great research. And what, you know, really all that matters is not how many mistakes you made, but how many you overcame, I guess. That's, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's so important, right, to just stay positive and keep trying, because you never know what the outcome will be. Lauren, did you go next?
Yeah, so I would say like my biggest mistake, like piggybacking off of what Thomas said, was definitely during the experimental process. So like as an environmental project, especially if you're not in the habitat of whatever you're studying yourself, you have to simulate it. And so you have to simulate it like as close as possible in order to, you know, sort of mimic what you're studying. And so since I was using plants and since I was trying to like mimic the ozone layer, which will never be 100%, but I realized that in the middle of my project, around a month before like the actual having to like put the poster board together sort of thing, I only had the film that I was like filtering out the sun with on only 2 sides of the PVC structure that I built, to not get like too nerdy, but it wasn't covering like all the sides. So there was 2 sides that were exposed. And so I realized that like all my data, even though it looked like a trend, it was off because I wasn't covering the entire plant with the film. So it was like, I was only 2 sides going to be covered. So I had to like redo the whole entire thing. And so even though it was frustrating, it was like, you just have to realize that you can't like, you know, cheat yourself out of size. Like you have to like make sure like you're doing it correctly. And so just gotta embrace that and move on with it. But I would say if it gets to a point where like you're really at a roadblock, you can maybe like rethink your research question. Maybe if there's like an issue with my question, or the last step, I would say is if there's an issue with the topic, but usually it's like doable in some way if you can find somewhere like in the inquiry process where there was a mistake. So it was just sort of like mixing and matching and correcting what I could notice at the time. Like I'm sure there was probably other things that I did as a 14-year-old that I didn't realize now at the time, but I would say that's the biggest mistake that I saw experimental wise, but it's always nice to catch it before. So keep like an eye out when you do.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Lauren. I think it's always a learning process, right? And like you said before, you know, if you have to rethink some things, maybe you can rely on your support network and ask your teacher to just kind of get your mind jogging again and go from there. Moitri, what about you? Any mistakes along the way? Advice about mistakes?
Yeah, I think that, you know, a lot of mistakes will come with your experimental process. I think that's a normal thing in science. And, honestly, most of the time mistakes actually help you learn. And I think that if I were to give one advice, if you do run into mistakes or any obstacles in your, research process, I think the main thing is to learn from them, because of course you want to try not to make the mistake again, but at the same time, you shouldn't let it hold you back. You should, take it as a step in the process and, learn from it, improve. I think personally, one of the biggest challenges I would say that I had was time management. There were many times where I would make, I guess, the mistake of not planning my time properly. And, there was even one part, I think this was in my second year of my project, where I had had my experiment planned out, but I didn't realize that I had to, keep enough time to print out the poster and, plan everything out, make the poster. So I did end up going past the deadline for submitting my poster, and that was a big issue that we had to work out. But I think that, managing your time is something that's also super important. And, I've made that mistake maybe twice, but now I'm, really, looking at making sure that my time is managed properly and that I get my research done in the time that's allotted for me so that I can, present all my work. So I think that as long as you learn from mistakes like the one that I made, then you should be good.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Moidre. I think all of you have expressed that it's okay to make mistakes and you most often learn from them. So sometimes that's the best lesson, right? So definitely don't get too down or hard on yourself if something doesn't go as you originally thought it would or as planned. So shifting back to the application process a little bit. Now I know it's been at least a year for two of you, Lauren, quite a few more years since you actually filled out the application. But do you have any tips for students that might be getting stuck trying to answer some of the application questions? Whoever wants to go first on this one, go ahead and unmute and start.
I can go first. So I think that honestly, I remember that when I was filling out the application, there were so many questions where I would look at them and I'd be like, nope, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to answer this. A lot of the questions are generic and a lot of them are specific. And, sometimes it can be super hard to look at a question and be like, oh my God, this is definitely the answer. That just doesn't come easily. So my main advice for if you do get stuck on a question is kind of, if you're thinking about it a lot, perhaps maybe taking a break from it and coming back to it later can really help. But also, one thing that I know helped me is to just sit back and brainstorm. You can start brainstorming from like a really broad spectrum and kind of get more specific. But, I remember there was just some questions where I had many different things that I could talk about, and there were, it was just hard picking one. So I think just being able to brainstorm in bullet points or just kind of brainstorm ideas in your head can really help you to clarify what you want to write. And that'll help make sure that you don't get stuck on a question for too long. So that's my piece of it.
Definitely. I'm not sure how much has changed question-wise since I applied. I'm sure it has a little bit, but I do remember it being split into the experimental questions about what's your hypothesis? Why did you choose the hypothesis? Why did you choose this topic? Conclusion, what went wrong, things like that. And then there was the creative aspect where you were able to dig deep. And I was like, whoa, for me, because other than my English class, I didn't really have to I didn't really even have outlets really think about that. And so I would say probably that's a part that I appreciated. So for finalists out there, if you are an inquisitive creative thinker, I would definitely look forward to filling out the application. Oh, and also don't be afraid to fill it out in parts. A lot of people feel obligated to fill out the entire application in once and have to be perfect. But no, I don't remember exactly how long it took me, but I do know that I would fill out a section, take a break, go back to it, proofread, fill out a section, go back to it, proofread, and then on and on and on. And so if you're passionate about your project and you know it at the back of your hands, you'll be fine. Like, it's going off about most years, so like that's how it is in the beginning, but then once you keep filling it out, you realize that like it's not that bad at all. And if you are able to be passionate about your project and put that in words, that's what the people reading the application is kind of like. See, you really want to be able to translate like your feelings and your thoughts in an articulate but unique enough way that like they can like see the individual you and your project as well. So I had a lot of fun filling it out back when I did it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to just take breaks. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't matter if you submit it, a month before the deadline or on the deadline day itself. So definitely can kind of go back and forth on it. And just as a reminder to all the nominees out there, you can even still, once you finish the application, finish all the tasks, you could submit and go back and edit. So it doesn't have to be perfect on the first time around. If you want to make sure you do submit early just to know that your entry is there and it counts, we definitely recommend doing that, but you can take your time until the deadline to really refine it. Thomas, how about you? Any tips for the application process?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember like the questions that well, but I do remember like there's the questions about your project, and then there's the questions that are like the creative, or like how would you solve this problem? And I think that for the questions about your project, like, and this is also true when you're like doing science fairs and doing interviews and things, like your project really well because you did it. So I wouldn't be too stressed out about it. Just write about what you did and what you know this way better than anyone else does. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. And then for the creative ones, like I think, and Moicher kind of said this, and I definitely agree with it, is that like you don't have to overthink it that much. They're just trying to see what how you go about solving problems and how you think about things. So just answer what you think, like what you really like. It's not like a trick question. It's just how would you solve this problem, and think about it and write what you honestly would do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Thomas. So for our next question, I actually wanted to ask you, Thomas, directly, because you, in addition to the top award, you also won the team award. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your experience working in the team challenges during finals week, what you learned from this, and if you've applied it to other experiences since then.
Yeah, the teams were great, and actually Moicher was in my team too, so we got that together. The teams were really fun because you had people from like all different skill sets, like all the projects were very different in my category. So in pretty much every challenge, it was like some people really knew how to code and do this part of the challenge, and other people really knew how to do something else. And so it was really, I think, well designed so that you had people with very different skill sets, and you had aspects of the challenge that required very different skill sets. And so you really all had to work together, and figure it out and sort of draw from each other's abilities. I think that's a really invaluable skill to be able to do that, because you can do so much more when you are able to work with other people who have different abilities than you, and when you're able to effectively share what you know how to do. And so I've definitely used this in something I can't like think of or pinpoint where, but it's you use it all the time if you are able to work with groups effectively.
Yeah, awesome. Maitri, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that being a part of the team, I think the most valuable experience was seeing how the different finalists, we all in our team, we all had different skill sets. Like Thomas said, we had some people were really good at coding, some people were really good at leadership. Specifically, Thomas, you were really excellent at that. There's just different things that everyone was strong in, and of course there are things everyone was weak in. That will happen with anyone, but really seeing how we can all bring together each other's strengths and weaknesses to kind of create a successful team effort, and just seeing how, different perspectives and ideas can come together from different people to help solve the challenges that we were given as the teams. And, that was just the most valuable experience I think that I had there.
Yeah, well, you definitely showed the judges that you worked really hard together on your team. So I think we'll go on to the next question.
Yeah, just to save some time, we're going to start kind of asking each of you some of these individual questions. And I also just wanted to mention for those watching, if you have questions for our alumni, please pop them into the chat. We're going to take questions at the end of our webinar as well. So Lauren, since you've kind of had the most time after your experience with the competition, I wanted to know, what is your biggest takeaway from Broadcom Masters at the time, now called the Thermo Fisher JIC? Were you surprised by anything that you kind of learned or took away from the experience?
And my biggest takeaway from the competition is probably going to be experience and collaboration. So I feel like everybody has something to learn just from like doing science fairs, like independent research, like in general, teaches you a lot about like responsibility, teaches you a lot about like more like higher level real world sort of thinking. And so I really, even if it didn't click then, like years down the road, when I look back at it, I just think about like how much that really did affect me and my like mindset moving forward on. And ironically enough, like what positively surprised me was that it did not feel like a competition at all. Like I know that a lot of like competitions like have a reputation for like students, being sort of like always it's like, oh, I don't like you, like this is the competition sort of mode, but like no, like we were all kids, but even then, like it was really easy to forget that we were even like competing for something. It was just very collaborative, it was very positive. And so I remember I said it like so many times, like even like in interviews and like media reports, like I can positively say that it did not feel like competition. I feel like a get together, like a little weekend where like at the end we like get a prize if we were like, good or something. But like funnily enough, me and my team also won the team award. And I can like say that it's probably because we just work so well together, like just being together, like learning from each other. And I think that one thing it taught me was that like group work doesn't have to be like such a taboo. Where like I noticed that like you can work very effectively in a team. It's just like having good communication. And so that's probably my biggest takeaway from Broadcom was a collaborative, communicative environment.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, hearing you all as past team award winners and even just finalists in general, knowing that that was such a big impact on you was great, because, science, engineering, STEM, sometimes it can feel like a very individual effort, but it's really not, especially if you continue and pursue it in college, further, postdoc research, all of that. It's really a team effort. So it's something that we think is obviously important to kind of learn young. And so that's why it's such a big part of the competition. So thanks for sharing. Go ahead, Gabby.
Yeah, so our next question, and I'll just ask one of you if anybody has a burning answer for this. What have you been up to since finals week? And is there anything you learned during finals week that led you where you are today? Moitri, I see you going for the unmute, I think.
Yeah, I was, kind of waiting if, Thomas had anything you wanted to say, but yeah, I think on the note about what I learned from finals week, specifically for research based, I know there's things like collaboration and other things that are really important, but also just in the research aspect of it, I think one thing I learned was that including many perspectives in your research is pretty important. So I had an environmental project, environmental engineering, and I was mainly focused on the eco-friendly sort of aspect of my solution. But, when I went to Broadcom, the judges and the interviewers are all coming from different backgrounds, and they're coming from different experiences. So they obviously have, a wide range of perspectives that they can bring to the table. So along with my project being mostly eco-friendly based, I said, wait, what about things like cost? What about the opinion of the public. These are things that I wouldn't have thought about if I didn't go to Broadcom and kind of hear what everyone else had to say about it, because in my project, I didn't even know public opinion was something to consider, but now I'm thinking back at it. Yeah, public opinion is pretty important, especially because you're trying to see if this is feasible in the real world and just at a larger scale. So I think that the main thing I learned from Broadcom is to include perspectives and different angles in your research. I've actually, since Broadcom, I've started a new project for my high school career, and but I'm making sure to include these different things that I learned as I'm going through my process.
That's great. We're so glad that you've been able to grow from your experience at finals week and continue doing research. And yeah, we'd be excited to learn about your project next year.
All right, so now we're going to shift gears a little bit away from kind of the competition and more specifics about research and everything else to other aspects of your lives and your academic careers. So do you have any interests or hobbies outside of science, and do you ever find that they cross over? Thomas, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, I run and I play piano and debate, lots of little things. And I think there are lots of ways that they cross over. The biggest one is definitely just, I guess, like work ethic is how you would describe it. Like being able to work through difficulties and challenges. It's when you're doing, I mean, we talked about earlier, like making mistakes in research, and you definitely do in, debate and piano especially. And, you have to learn from that, but just being able to work really hard, it takes a lot of effort to do good research, and it takes a lot of effort to, get faster when you're running. But if you have the ability to, like, really put your mind to something and work for it, I think that that's a really important thing. And if you can do it in research, you can definitely do it in other areas as well. So yeah, I think there's lots of crossover in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, a lot of crossover in different between hobbies and research. And I know Moiture talked about time management earlier. It's obviously takes a lot of time management to be able to balance all of the extracurriculars and hobbies and passions along with your passion for science and research. So we'll end on this last question, kind of along the same topic, considering like you're all busy with so many different things going on. What are some tips that you have for managing your time, managing your mental health, especially for students, who are trying to add the application on top of everything that they're doing? Lauren, do you want to start with that?
Sure. So like a big tip that I have probably for managing a lot of time, because like you're probably going to get these questions a lot, but the top 3 would be to plan and prioritize. So like I'm not the best organized person, so I may not create a schedule, but I will create like a mental to-do list, or like put it in my email drafts, like have a to-do list or like on my phone to allocate time for different tasks and activities. And so identify my priorities and allocate dedicated time slots to them. But then also to be realistic about what I can accomplish each day and to set like achievable goals. And then I probably from there, like break the task into smaller steps. So like I said about like taking breaks and like stopping here and not having to do everything at one time. That approach makes it a lot easier to not be overwhelmed and to stay focused and track your progress, and also to avoid procrastination, because you can't say, oh, there's so much to do at one time. Well, you don't have to do it at one time. So it's like you don't have that like sort of excuse in your brain. And then of course, the last one would be to practice self-care. So a big toxic trait of mine, especially a few years ago, would be to put my work first, even though like I know that like I'm literally burning out because of it. And so I would say it's okay to like say no and recognize your limits and not take on more than you can handle. And then also like take breaks and recharge, de-stress when you need to, and like prioritize mental health above all else when it's necessary. That's probably something that I learned a lot this senior year as well, just like putting my mental health first. So those are my biggest takeaways.
Yeah, that's awesome advice, Lauren. Thanks. Thomas or Moitri, anything to add to that before we start taking some questions from the audience?
Yeah, I'll just add quickly. I have lots of like to-do lists and planners and various things all over the place. And I think that's really good and important to have like some sort of organized system that like works for you. Just to keep track, because when you have a lot of stuff going on, you have lots of little tasks. That's important. But I also think, especially lately, I've been trying to work on this too. Like there's something to be said for just like spontaneity and making time for yourself and hanging out with friends and that sort of thing. It's if you start to burn out because you just have too much going on, you won't get anything done. And also there's more to life than just schoolwork and that sort of thing. So really just it is really good to have like an organized and productive like system, but you also want to be able to know when to sort of take a break and go hang out with friends and that sort of thing. And so it's finding that balance that matters.
Yeah, that balance is super important and only gets more important as you go on with life. So thanks for sharing. All right, we have some questions that came in from the audience, and everyone that's watching, you can continue to pop some into the chat. This first question that we have is, what was the hardest part of the competition and how did you deal with it? So might take a minute to think about that, but whoever wants to start can go ahead.
I think I could take a chance at this question. I originally anticipated that the competition was going to be much harder than it actually was. Once I got there, I realized that things were actually flowing really smoothly, and presenting in front of the judges wasn't a scary experience like I anticipated it to be at the national level. Probably the hardest part was getting over the stress and the anxiety itself right before everything happened, because that sort of thing can really pull you down if you kind of have that mental thing that oh my god, this is so stressful, this is gonna be the worst thing I've ever done. It was actually something that I felt so comfortable at judging. It was kind of weird actually, because normally I get stressed and I would like over prepare, something goes on, but this time around at Broadcom it was just a completely different thing, and it completely changed my perspective of judging, because after that I know that judging became a lot more comfortable and I was more comfortable speaking about my project and my thoughts. So yeah, I think the hardest part is just getting over that mental block that some of you might be experiencing, like I once did, that it's really hard, but you'll do great. I know that for sure.
I definitely agree with what she said. Piggybacking off that, the hardest part is just doing the project. Like once you do it, you know it, you're passionate about it. The hardest part after that is done. Like the competition is really just communicating that what you've already done on the regional and the state level. So it's like, it really was not difficult at all. It's really just about getting the experience. So I guess like Nisha said, if you can get over like the mental block part of it, but like the hardest part was already done. So don't like worry about having to do anything too crazy, because there's none.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what Lauren just said. I think that like the hardest part for me was like the drive down. I got like stressed out and it was kind of crazy. But as soon as I got there, it was like it got better pretty much instantly, because it's just a really everyone was really nice and welcoming, and it really wasn't like, it was challenging in terms of like the challenges and things, but it wasn't challenging in the ways that I thought it would be. So that was a good thing.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So our next question from the audience was, what were your steps after your project? So Moitri, you mentioned that you're continuing research. Lauren, Thomas, are you planning to continue doing research, and have you since?
I definitely plan to continue research in college. I kind of like laid it low though during high school. Like I don't know how to explain it. The burnout after Broadcom, like when it was like after Broadcom was crazy. Like everybody was like, "Well, I came to see you at ISF," and I was like, "Whoa, slow down." Like I needed some time to like recalibrate, but I did end up doing like different symposiums, things like the Junior Science Committee Symposium or like the U.S. Stockholm Junior Water Prize. So like definitely for the audience, like look at like other things that aren't necessarily science, like other like, you know, symposia at the conferences as well to be able to communicate your research. And probably going back to the question of like, what I've learned afterwards was that it's one thing to do the research and like another thing to communicate it with people. And so I would say that like, I've learned a lot more about like environmental advocacy and like how to incorporate my research and like take that a step further into like, because for example, like during public day, I was talking to the judges, but I was also talking to parents and I was talking to kids. And it was like, I had to not dumb down, but like adapt my language so they could all understand it, if that makes sense. So it was like in environmental advocacy, you have to be able to like translate your research into a way that the general public can understand. And so in college, I'll probably be doing a lot more advocacy work, but like also a lot more just coastal environmental research. And I'm also passionate about like medicine as well. So whatever branch of doctorate I decide to become, I would like to say like neuroscience as well. The question about like mental health advocacy. So that's my little tip.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, science communication is key. Whoever your audience is needs to be able to understand your work. So thanks for sharing that. Thomas, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was also going to say that the communication aspect of it is huge, and that's really important, not just in science fairs, but like in the world generally. It's really important for people to be able to both communicate science and, you know, understand it. And also I think, you know, I'm also doing more science fairs and things, so can you keep going with that? I think it's really cool to have have science fairs as an opportunity to do research and share it with other people and get to know people with similar interests and talk about it. It's, I think, really a very nice experience.
Great.
Yeah,
Moitri,
that's
did
awesome.
you
Oh, go ahead.
Moitri, did you want to add anything about your continuing project?
Yeah, again, I think I pretty much mentioned this before, but I'm taking the things I learned from Broadcom and I'm trying to apply them to my current research process. And yeah, I think so far it's going well. I just, finished 1 year of my high school science fair, and I know that I can say confidently Broadcom really did help. Thinking back at it, it was really impactful and it really did help me a lot just in my confidence, but also, it really helps you to move forward in your research, and it was just a great experience.
Thanks for sharing. That's great.
All right, so it also looks like we have some just general kind of program questions that I want to just take a couple minutes to answer for everyone that's watching, just so we can get some of these out of the way. And to everyone that's watching, if we don't answer your question today, definitely email us at jic@societyforscience.org, and we'll be sure to get back to you then. We have a question about, well, can even a small project be in the top 30? And I think the answer is definitely yes. You see a wide range of projects. Everyone here has kind of said, you might be intimidated by some of the top projects you see, but especially, at the middle school level, a really solid research project can go a really far way. So don't let that kind of intimidate you. Some logistic questions here. Would finals week interfere with school days? It does. It's a 5-day long experience, so you will have to take some time off of school. We send request absence letters to your school so that they hopefully, understand what the experience is that you're giving up your school days for. And usually our finalists, you have to do some homework maybe during finals week, but Lauren's shaking her head no, so that's great. But it always works out in the end, I think. Let's see some other questions here. Oh, I just lost all of them.
There was one question about team projects. So in a team of 2, do both team members need to fill out the application? So the application is more of an individual process. So if a team is nominated, then each team member needs to fill out an individual application in their own words. And of course, we understand if there's some overlap. But the application asks, more about the project. It asks about individual interests and creativity, and really evaluates each person's communication skills and critical thinking. So it's okay for one team member to submit their application and the other to not, because it really is more of an individual process.
Thanks, Gabby. And then I see another question here about the visual aid and what you can include in it. Can you put graphs and data tables from your paper? Absolutely. That's what the visual aid is for. It's to represent all of those things, graphs, charts, pictures, whatever you had on your science fair poster board can go into that visual aid. But because you're already answering all about your project within the application itself, you don't need to include any of the other kind of additional details, really just those visuals, any of the captions and titles that go with that. That's what you're going to want to include in that section. Another question is just about what do we do in the challenges? Do we bring our poster, and is there a tip to win? I don't know that we have a specific tip to win, but you will be bringing your posters down. You have the first day is going to be all about your research project, and we call it project judging. So you'll talk to the judges about the project that earned you the nomination that you applied to the competition with. And then you'll do two days full of team challenges. I think you've heard a little bit about the challenges from everyone here so far, but they cover a lot of different subjects of STEM, hands-on, really fun, I think, is the general consensus usually from our finalists. So I definitely recommend watching our highlights videos that are also on this YouTube channel to get more of an idea of what some of those challenges are. We also have blogs that usually cover a little bit of a recap for some of the challenges each year. So I would take a look at that. We'll end with this one question that maybe you might not remember, but maybe you do. When did each of you submit your application? Do you remember how close you were to the application deadline?
I could probably take a chance at this one too. So I did this application a couple times. The first time I remember me being so close to the deadline, it was kind of scary. I think I was like 1 hour off. It was such a time, like I was really testing out my chances over there. But yeah, that was probably one of the scariest experiences in my research that I've really faced. And I don't recommend that. It's okay to take your time and kind of see if you have any last minute edits to make, but I would definitely not wait until the last hour. The second time around, I did much better. I made sure, I don't want the same thing to happen again. Again, kind of tying back to the time management. The third time, actually I had started my application late because as we covered before, it's really easy to lose motivation. And after me not getting anything the first 2 years of me applying, it was kind of hard for me to try again the third year, my last year. But, I took a chance at it. I said, who knows what's going to happen. I think I did, I started the application late, but since I had experience, I could fill it out a little easier. I got it in on time then too. And yeah, it worked out. So I think that, was close. And then after that, I made sure a good.
We might be losing Moitri a little bit. Is that just me?
She's frozen for me too. Moitri, if you come back, just jump right in.
But that was a great response. Thanks for sharing. And I like how you kind of had the spectrum of when you submitted the application there. So that was great. Great to hear. Thomas, do you remember when you submitted your application?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when I submitted, but I do remember I wasn't, I felt like a long shot, so I wasn't really prioritizing or anything. I wanted to get done, but I wasn't super stressed out about it. And I remember I was pretty close to the deadline, and I thought I was done with it and filled it all out. And I clicked
Oh,
I hadn't done
no.
yet. So I had some more to do. So I think I don't know I was pretty close to the deadline, but it worked out. It was okay.
Yeah, definitely remember to scroll down to the bottom of each task. Some of them are 2 pages, so make sure you hit that next button. But it's also good to know that, though we don't recommend finishing it or starting at least on the last day, it's definitely doable. So still get it done. So don't let that stop you if you decide to wait until the morning of June 14th to finish or submit. Lauren, how about you?
No, actually, I completely forgot I did apply twice, 7th and 8th grade. And I know that like I said, I didn't really know about what Broadcom was. Like, even though I was nominated for it, it was like, okay, whatever. Like 7th grade, that's my first time doing science fair. My mom was the one who like made me apply because she's like, oh, what's this? I was like, oh, I got nominated for this thing. She was like, no, you're gonna apply. And I applied, but was it good? No, it was not. And so without surprise that I didn't want, I was like, whatever, back to daily life. And then 8th grade, I also was not going to apply. My mom was like, you should do it. And so I did, except this time I didn't have it. Like I gave it my all. I believe I submitted it, I think late April, mid to late April. It was due like in June. So I got it done like in April. Like I said, like I sat down, did like a part of it one day, came back, part of it another day, came back, and then like read through it all, then like edited it and then submitted it. But like, was I expecting anything? No. I think that kind of like made the process a little bit better because like I was just like in school, like witnessing all the updates. Like, oh, congrats, top 30. I was like, oh, okay, this is the end of the road here. Okay, congrats, top 30. I was like, oh, because in the phone call, surprisingly enough, the phone call, like when I had gotten it, I missed it because I was at school. So my mom was like waiting outside her car and I already knew what it was. I don't even know how, but I already knew what it was. And so I would just say that like, as long as you are passionate about your project, you know what you're talking about, it's not going to be that bad. But I know that I just submitted it in April to get my mom off my back. So thanks to her, props to her. But yeah, listen to your parents. It's another advice that I have because I wasn't good.
I was going to say that sounds like a good piece of advice. So thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you all for joining us today. Really, really appreciate you sharing your words of wisdom to this year's applicants. Everyone who's online, thanks for submitting questions. Again, if we didn't answer them today, definitely email us. We'll get back to you. One that I did just want to clarify that, Lauren's experience, actually even Moitree's does speak to a little bit. Is there a certain age or grade limit to get into the top 30? No, not at all. If anyone in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade is eligible to compete, that is when you're doing your science fair project. And then when you compete in finals week, you'll obviously be 1 year older, 7th, 8th, 9th. That's totally fine. And there's no kind of quota or anything that we have in terms of how many students from each grade. So everyone has an equal chance there to make it to the finals. So thanks everyone. Again, really appreciate your time, everyone watching. I hope this helped motivate you to go back into your applications today or open them today and submit by our June 14th deadline. We'll be answering emails constantly up until then. So if you have any questions, definitely email us, and good luck to everyone. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.